Welcome to this month's Creation Justice webinar, gathering place for building a faith-rooted and faith-sustained movement addressing some of the most critical issues facing our world today. I'm Brooks Barrett, the Environmental Justice Minister for the United Church of Christ. I am joined by my esteemed co-host, the Reverend Michael Malcolm, the Executive Director for Alabama Interfaith Power and Light and the People's Justice Council. Today, I want to give special thanks to St. John's United Church of Christ in Richmond, Virginia. I am in Richmond for the board meeting of Creation Justice Ministries, and St. John's UCC has provided me with a place to set up shop today for this webinar. Much gratitude for their hospitality. Michael, before I introduce our terrific lineup of guests today, I'm interested in getting your thoughts in framing our conversation about our topic for today. Cop City, we'll get into it later about what it is, but it brings to the fore many different issues. How are you thinking about this conversation for today, Michael?
You know, Brooks, I'm excited, and there's a couple of reasons why I'm excited. One, I'm excited to look in the faces of the panelists and see all these beautiful Black and young faces, and to see these reverend names. I told them I'm gonna have to not cuss this time because too many reverends on the call for me to start using my other language. But I'm just excited about this conversation. The second reason I'm excited about this conversation is because I am a native of Atlanta, Georgia, and my entire, or not my entire family, but just about my entire family still lives in Atlanta, Georgia. And so this is something that's near and dear to me, because just as I'm looking at these Black and young and beautiful faces, I know that these faces and faces like ours are the ones that's threatened by militarization of our policing forces. And in our communities, we are the ones that get policed, while we're not the only ones that are committing crimes. And so for us to look at a cop city is a real imminent threat. And so to hear these reverends to speak up against this injustice, to speak up against this threat of injustice is amazing to me. And the reason why it's so amazing is because of my third reason that I'm excited to be on this call. Just as Brooks has shouted out where he is, I'm gonna shout out where I am as well, because I'm in DC right now doing some lobbying. And right now I'm sitting at the Lutheran Church of the Reformation, and they've allowed for me to use some space so I can have this call. But while here, and while being in this spiritual circle, if you will, it was really laid on me that we have built models that we lend our voice. When we have models of ministry that have used their voices, and as a result of them using their voice, they've been able to change society. We lend our voices to movements. We lend our voices to causes. We lend our voices to this, and we lend our voices for that. But when we use our voice to speak up for truth, to speak truth in power, to speak up for what is holy, to speak out against what is unholy and what is unrighteous, to stand for what is righteous. When we use our voice, then we change society, just as our models of ministry have done in the past. And I'm so grateful and so happy to be on this call, because I see some young voices. I see some voices that look like me, but I see some voices that are utilizing their voice to speak truth in this moment. And I'm excited to hear what you all have to say. Thank you.
Right. Thank you, Michael. And now let me introduce our speakers for today. We've got the Reverend Seyij Allen, who is an unapologetically Black Baptist minister of faith and justice organizer and a lifelong pursuer of the kingdom of heaven on earth. He currently works as the Georgia manager for faith in public life. Interesting fun facts: in their free time, Seyij enjoys going down YouTube rabbit holes and connecting over sushi and sake My next time in Atlanta, we're going to do sake. I don't know about sushi, seafood allergy. I'll meet you halfway. All right. We also have with us the Reverend Darci Jaret, whose call to ministry has frequently centered upon leading people in creative expression. Darci brings their artistic gifts and talents to ministry. Darci has started programs like Created to Create, an art ministry pastoral internship program. Darci received a Louisville Pastoral Study Project grant to work with people in recovery through spiritual art making. Interesting fun fact, their family has chickens in a lovely junkie yard. Before drinking sake, I want to stop by and see that yard. And last but not least, we also have with us the Reverend Keyanna Jones, who is a community organizer with Community Movement Builders and a member of the Faith Coalition to Stop Cop City. She has distinguished herself in many regards, in particular in struggles pertaining to the welfare of children and advancement of affordable and accessible child care. Along with her husband, Jared Moore, she parents 5 children. Keyanna, you'll have to give us some fun facts about you so I can work a few more things into my next trip to Atlanta. But we are grateful to have all 3 of you with us. Keyanna, would you get us started by helping us to orient ourselves to what Cop City is about and the many issues that are at play?
Absolutely. And thank you so much again, Brooks, for having us. Fun fact about me, I noticed that your last name has to be Berndt, and you have actually pronounced it correctly. So I believe that you are probably of German descent. I am a freelance linguist, and I do translate German, Dutch, and Russian sometimes when I can get it together. But that is a fact about me. I happen to be what some people call a polyglot. I enjoy learning different languages and being able to speak to people from other places. But Cop City, this is where we find ourselves, Cop City. Being an Atlanta native, born here and raised in East Atlanta Village, living currently in DeKalb County still. Up until last week, I lived right behind the forest, which is the proposed site of Cop City. And what Cop City is what many people have heard to be proposed as a public safety training facility for public safety officers here in Atlanta, Georgia. And many people try not to say more than that because all they want people to believe is that this is a facility that is strictly for the training of police officers. And we're talking about technical training of police officers and firefighters, supposedly. But I know that the people who are proponents of Cop City understand that when people hear the term police training, people think of things like de-escalation training. People think of things like implicit bias training. They have the idea that police would be trained to be better officers for the protection of the public. However, what Cop City really is 381 acres of forest lands that Mayor Andre Dickens would destroy in favor of Mount Training, which is military operations on urban terrain. That facility would include a mock city that would be complete with a mock apartment building, burn towers, where they say that the firefighters could practice putting out fires, but literally the quote that was in original plans was a mock city for training of urban warfare. Urban. When you hear the word urban, although the definition of urban is related to a metropolitan area, when you hear urban, you think Black. And when you hear urban warfare, you need to understand that what's being said is warfare on Black bodies. So that mock city that would be included within Cop City, which is what we have named it because we understand what's going to happen there. That is a mock city for police to train, military style training in our local environment. It would even include a bar for the officers to go to and kick back after a long day of training to kill Black people in their neighborhoods. The original plans also included a bomb testing facility. Since the inception of the plan, the Community Stakeholder Advisory Committee was able to successfully pressure the Atlanta Police Foundation to remove the bomb testing facility, but there is still a firing range that would be included. And this property sits right between two schools, one elementary school and one high school. So here you have students at school that already hear gunshots perpetually from the existing firing range that sits on the property. And then you would go and create a brand new state-of-the-art firing range for more firing practice to happen right in the environment where children are. And the unique thing about the land where they are proposing to build Cop City is that it is situated in unincorporated DeKalb County, but also within the city of Atlanta in a neighborhood that has been historically predominantly Black. This part of East Atlanta has not been hit hard by gentrification. So because of that, this land is now being targeted. And let me, before I go further, just say that also in that area of Southeast DeKalb County and Southeast Atlanta, that same neighborhood has been targeted for environmental racism for decades. Before the inception of Cop City, there used to sit 2 landfills within that neighborhood. Entrenchment Creek, which is part of the South River watershed, which is housed within the South River Forest, which is the land that they're looking to decimate. Entrenchment Creek is heavily polluted already with lead runoff from the bullets that come from the existing firing range. Now that they have begun to clear cut trees in this area, also Entrenchment Creek is now well above the allowable levels of silt being run into the creek according to the Clean Water Act and also Georgia Environmental Protection Department standards. So what you see right here is racialized capitalism, environmental racism, and militarization of police in a Black neighborhood. So much intersectionality right here with the inception of Cop City. And this was all conceived following the uprisings of 2020, when people here in Atlanta showed their outrage over the murders of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, Rayshard Brooks. People in Atlanta, these Black elites that love to call Atlanta the Black Mecca, they saw a show of democracy amongst Black people like they never had in their lifetimes, because we had heard about the civil rights movement. We heard about things that our ancestors did in order to help us advance as a people, but we had never seen it. So the Black elite got a little bit scared, because what happened was that the people within the white supremacist infrastructure came down on them and said, hey, you need to control your people. Something's got to be done about this. And that is when the affluent, predominantly white neighborhood of Buckhead said, look, if y'all don't get them together, we are leaving the city of Atlanta. And Mayor Keisha Lance Bottom said, no, wait a minute, no. You can't take that 40% of our tax base. We are going to uphold our end of our silent agreement. We're going to keep those other Black people over there so that they can't get to you, because you can maintain your exclusivity. You can maintain the racism that you perpetuate. You can maintain all of that. Just don't take our money, and we are going to do you a solid. We're going to put Cop City right there in one of their Blackest neighborhoods to keep their Black asses right there so that they don't have to step foot into Buckhead. And this is how things began to develop. And you have the inception of the Atlanta Police Foundation, which is essentially run by major corporations. And I will say about these corporations who have people who sit on the board of the Atlanta Police Foundation is that they are the same bad actors who supported an omnibus voter suppression bill and many of the voter suppression bills that come through the Georgia state legislature. So those include Chick-fil-A, Home Depot, Waffle House, Delta, Coca-Cola, Bank of America, Wells Fargo, Truist Bank, Chase, JP Morgan Chase. You have these companies that we patronize heavily, but what we end up doing is lending to the funding of the very people who would oppress us. And what we have decided to do as clergy and people of faith is stand up and say, no, we won't let it happen on our watch, because as watchmen, we have a responsibility. We have a responsibility to cry loud and spare not, and make sure that we ring every alarm in the face of injustice. This is environmental racism, pure and simple. And out of that stems so many other problems that we have with the system of capitalism, which by its very root is racist and white supremacist. So that is where we are right now. That is what we are fighting against. And what we want to make sure is that we help people understand that this was a moral decision to stand against Cop City, because we're standing not only for climate justice, we are standing for racial and social justice, because that is something that we cannot ignore in the face of what it means to destroy the natural environment that nourishes a Black community.
That's why she goes first, Rev. We can take up an offering, right?
Amen. Amen. Well, I think, and thank you, Rev, for that overview. You know what? I think looking at the demographics, because you used a lot of terms like these Black neighborhoods and historically Black. Can we be a little bit more specific because of our diversity with the audience? I really want them to know why you're saying Black, because they need to understand Atlanta. I know Atlanta. I'm like, and matter of fact, I put in the chat to you that I'm born and raised in East Atlanta as well. So we got that in common. But help them to understand Atlanta. They need to know about
Oh,
the
yes,
age.
definitely. So where we are right now in the city of Atlanta, East Atlanta is a quintessential example of what white flight is and what the cycle of gentrification is. Because when I was born way back 43 years ago in East Atlanta, we were at the point where we were becoming predominantly Black. See, when my grandparents moved into that neighborhood 50 years ago, they were probably the third or maybe fourth Black family that moved into the neighborhood. But they moved in at a time when white flight was just starting. So white people who were in that predominantly white neighborhood at the time had begun to leave, because with the wealth and opportunity gap, it takes us Black people about 20 to 30 years to catch up to where our white counterparts are. So my family was one of the families that had begun to catch up. They began to move into East Atlanta. White families began to move out. Now, 20, 25 years later, the cycle of gentrification started again, because now they've begun to see the value in East Atlanta, because as the real estate agents say, location, location, location. Right there in East Atlanta, you are bordered by I-20, I-285. You have numerous streets that are main thoroughfares that go straight into downtown. If you go further east, you're going to go right into the heart of Southeast DeKalb County, which was a poppin' Black area at the time also. You had white people saying, why in the world are we all the way out here in Smyrna when we can be right downtown by where we work? We want to live, work, and play in the same area. So gentrification started to happen again. And what ended up happening was that many of those families who I grew up with 10 years ago, the matriarchs and patriarchs were dying. And they had children who said, you know what? We can get out of this neighborhood. We can take our families to other places that we find more desirable. So they sold. They sold and moved out. White people came in. Now you got more businesses up in East Atlanta. Now you have a more diverse neighborhood. But now, 2023, we are predominantly white in East Atlanta Village. Move farther east to Gresham Park, where they are proposing to build Cop City. And it hasn't gotten down that far yet, see, because Gresham Park is still right by Ellenwood. It's still a little too Black. And white people aren't so comfortable being all up in there the way they are in East Atlanta Village just yet. So this is where we need to put Cop City, because if we put Cop City here, we know that once we do, the cycle of gentrification is going to accelerate in that area. And we can bring it all the way up to speed with East Atlanta Village. So now we have a bunch of hustling and bustling shops up in East Atlanta Village that we can patronize, whether we want to have sushi, drink sake. If we want a club, we can do that. If we want seafood, we can do that. Whatever we want is right here. And we can have it all 10 minutes away from downtown. What some of these gentrifiers have said is that they want 10-minute cities where they are only 10 minutes away from the heart of downtown Atlanta. And they believe that it's now their time to be entitled to that, because the Black people who they pushed out before had children that didn't do so well. So the neighborhood couldn't thrive. But now that it's at its lowest, we'll come and bring our money back. We'll bring it up and make sure that we price them out. And that is why this tract of land is significant in the inception of Cop City, because we have to look at the way gentrification works and how Black families are historically behind in wealth and opportunity, and what this means to this neighborhood.
Rev Allen, it looked like you wanted to jump all in on that. So I want to make sure I honor you and give you your time and honor that anticipation. So let me hear it, Doc. Let me hear it.
Yeah, well, thank you, Reverend Malcolm and Brooks. Thank y'all for the invitation. I am not a native to Atlanta, but I've lived here for almost 13 years now, come August, and predominantly on the east side of the city, in Decatur and DeKalb County. And so I know very well what Reverend Keyanna and you all are speaking of. And having done just a little bit of visiting when I was a child to my aunt and uncle who did stay right outside Atlanta, I learned a lot about how this city and this area has changed. The 1996 Olympics were a pivotal shift when it comes to Black neighborhoods in the city of Atlanta. At the same time as the Olympics, you also have Black cultural beacons or staples like Freaknik and the birthing of Atlanta Black Pride. All of these things are merging. And so you have a heightened sense of Black identity in a city that is changing and evolving. And these become, as Reverend Keyanna has talked about, catalysts for gentrification of Black neighborhoods. So in addition to wanting those 10-minute cities, which God bless, I'd love to be able to have that as well, as long as it doesn't mean I'm exploiting my neighbors. There were lots of promises made and broken. And that pattern has continued to this very moment. Reverend Keyanna talked about the fact that what's happening with the South River watershed is against the EPA, against our own federal government's Clean Water Act. We're talking about land that was stewarded and at one point inhabited by Indigenous and Black folks, now being overrun by people who want, I love that phrase, 10-minute cities. So I want to bring in a little bit of the history of how we also got here. And then we have this myth of Black capitalism. Black churches, Black wannabe capitalists, and elites made a deal with the devil. And the deal was a false promise of wealth and class and status, right? Atlanta had been called, I don't know if this was Mayor Maynard, but the city too busy to hate. And that is a lie. That is one of the biggest lies that could have ever been told. Because what we have is the appropriation and the taking of Black culture, right? And Black land, Black housing, all of the things that make Atlanta, Atlanta, with the least of us being left behind. So I just wanted to call those things out too, just to frame a little bit more of that sociocultural context when we're talking about how we get to Cop City, how we get to a place where you have Black municipal local leadership and a Black police forces going together hand in hand with Black elites, Black, as we talked before, preachers and lay leaders, and saying we actually want to do more harm in the name of trying to get ourselves up a particular class and status rank in a city that has the largest wealth gap in the United States. Atlanta has the largest racial wealth gap in the United States in 2023. We have over half of our counties in the state of Georgia that do not have access to a hospital. We have 159 counties. Over half of them can't get to healthcare in their county. They've got to go up another county or two, right? And we're talking about a city that has continued to make and break promises, like the closure of Atlanta Medical Center, like the opening and the delayed closure of the Atlanta City Jail, ACDC. So all of these promises and deals being made in the dark have been brought into the light. And we hope that the work that has been doing to expose these myths, to expose the lies, and to reckon with this grasping for capitalism and status and wealth of Black folks, that we can come to a place of common ground and say, that is a myth, that is a lie. What we need to be doing is ensuring that all of us, particularly those at the margins of Black and Browns communities, are lifted up, right? And Cop City is the exact opposite of that. We are looking at a project that is literally dictated on our genocide, and it will not stand on our watch. There are so many people of faith. We are Christians here. Some of us are Christian adjacent, but we are followers of the way, followers of the ministry and life and teachings of Jesus of Nazareth, the Black Messiah, the refugee, the Jewish Palestinian who said, if nothing else, abolition is the way. Abolition is the way. And so what does that look like? That looks like people of faith, not just Christians, though. I want to highlight that we have Jews and Muslims and Sikhs and Buddhists and people of no faith, atheists, right? Joining together in this coalition to say, we know that there is a better way. Whether you call it the kingdom of God, whether you call it the Pure Land in Buddhism, we know there's a better way. This is not God's will. This is not beloved community. And so that is why we are not just defending Weelaunee People's Forest, but we are saying, stop Cop City.
Thank you. We are getting an explosion of knowledge, an explosion of prophetic ministry. Darci, I want to make sure we bring in your voice so you can explode onto the scene as well. I know you've got some relevant background for helping us to unpack the context even more. Tell us some things about the housing crisis in Atlanta, or some other pieces you can fill in for us.
Well, I love, and I could listen to Reverend Leo Seyij and Reverend Keyanna talk about this because the knowledge is there. And I bring a perspective as a local pastor at a church that sits right next to I-20 in a neighborhood that was crisscrossed with highways. And I also work in social services. I'm a bivocational pastor. And so from that perspective, the housing crisis here in Atlanta that is ongoing, and the service gap that exists for folks here in the city and beyond is enormous. The wage gap, and the fact that we're considering investing $33 million plus. This is just the beginning of it. That's just the promissory note. We know it's going to go over that if it gets approved. $33 million in a city that has just closed most recently two hospitals in predominantly Black neighborhoods, one in East Point and one in 30312 in Old Fourth Ward. And so we're thinking about this and weighing this in this project, which we know comes out of this history really directly from the 2020 riots or 2020 police uprisings and conversations that happened around creating a Rayshard Brooks Peace Center right there in the neighborhood that sits adjacent to the federal prison. And the fact that was being blocked directly. What we're seeing in the movement over and over again is outright repression. Repression when it comes to the voices of dissent amongst people within the city, amongst people in unincorporated DeKalb County, and repression for organizations and agencies that step out and say no to the project. So I think we need to really think about what the values are. And I think that that's everything that has been alluded to, but what are the values of a city that prioritizes the protection of corporations and corporate profit, which, so if you're coming to this conversation having just listened to national news, is the only news around this, or has been the only news around this, is look at these protests that became that damaged property. Now, we'd love to really double down on the distinction between nonviolent direct action and a peaceful movement, both of which we embody, and so we just want to think about policing, police repression. I'd love to, further on in the conversation, speak about abolition and abolition principles through the education and programs within the local church, and how we can do more of that. I think we're on this webinar with a bunch of pastors. And so increasing our vocabulary around mutual aid and the care, and what Miriam Kaba calls the constellation of care, really making up the abolitionist world that we as a faith coalition are holding in our prophetic imagination. So thank you.
You all have made or alluded to the fact that in these communities there are no hospitals. Are there any fresh food sources?
I think that
Absolutely not.
absolutely not.
One of the things that makes Weelaunee so special is that Weelaunee was a gathering place for people to skill share. And one of those things that we were sharing with each other was how to be self-sufficient and biosustainable in community. So food distribution and potlucks were a regular part of our gatherings in Weelaunee. We still continue food distribution and potlucks, sometimes outside of the barricades where they have now blocked off that public park, which they illegally closed despite a court order to stop work there. But CEO of DeKalb County, Michael Thurman, found a way around it to appease Andre Dickens, mayor of Atlanta. But many of the people, and I would just say not only in that community in Southeast Atlanta, the other communities that are over policed and underserved are essentially food deserts.
I want to
community of Southeast Atlanta. Go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you paused. I guess they're just the video paused. So something else you talked about, something else you all keep saying is unincorporated DeKalb County. We don't, the audience doesn't know what that actually means, but there's a strong injustice in unincorporated, and especially unincorporated DeKalb County. But any of our counties that are unincorporated, or any portions that are unincorporated, are also underprotected. And can anybody speak on the fact of the unincorporated tag being, and who belongs to those unincorporated areas? Because it means something for it to be unincorporated. Can anybody speak to that?
Do you want to take that one, Leo?
I'll just say, because I'm not an expert on that topography wise, but I can say, as someone who's lived most of my time in Atlanta in unincorporated DeKalb County, it's so tricky, right? So everything from where my tax dollars go to the schools that if I had children that they'd be able to attend, to the sources that they have for clean water, clean air, all of that is connected, right? And then, we can't go too far down this because we'll be here all day, but from an electoral politics standpoint, that is another part of this equation that makes it really, really difficult to pinpoint who is accountable for what. I remember when I first moved here trying to find out, like, no, wait a minute, is my water bill, I'm living in the city of Atlanta, but I'm in unincorporated DeKalb County. So who's paying my water bill? And I couldn't figure out who to talk to about this crazy bill that I kept seeing every month. That's another piece of the equation. Malcolm, you hit the nail on the head. In my experience and in my limited knowledge of this, but in my own lived experience, living in a place of like this liminal space means that I am subject to any and every type of discrimination. I'm subject to not really knowing what my rights are, to what the rights of the land are on which I inhabit. But in addition to that, I'm not really able to pinpoint who to hold accountable. In the mix of all that muddy water is where we get Mayor Andre Dickens of the city of Atlanta interjecting and forcing upon unincorporated DeKalb County this Cop City project.
Absolutely, Leo. It is purposed by design for unincorporated areas like unincorporated DeKalb County and the small portion of Fulton County that is unincorporated. We are not governed by a mayor and city council. We are governed by a board of commissioners that essentially makes decisions and makes deals without us many times. For us here in Southeast Atlanta, that's unincorporated DeKalb, what that means is that, as Leo said, you're confused about who to hold accountable. What you're subject to is the expectation that you're going to abide by every ordinance of the city of Atlanta and the county of DeKalb. But when you have an issue, you are going to get the runaround about who's going to fix it, how you will remedy it, and who is supposed to be accountable. What it means if you're a homeowner in that space is that you pay double taxes. My grandmother pays double taxes because she still lives in that house that I was born in 43 years ago. That is in East Atlanta Village. She still lives there. She's paying taxes to DeKalb County and to the city of Atlanta. It used to be when I was a little girl, if you call the police, both the city of Atlanta and DeKalb County would come out because we are in zone 6. Now they streamlined it so that only DeKalb County is going to come out. But if you are in that area and you so-called break a traffic law, if there is a city of Atlanta police car on Glenwood Avenue, then they're going to stop you and you are subject to their jurisdiction as well. So it is a bunch of muddy water of confusion. And what it does is make you believe that, you know what, I'm not even going to bother because it's too confusing to figure out. I don't want to be bothered with it. So let the chips fall where they may. So you get less civic engagement, less public participation in civic processes, and then our communities continue to be underserved because nobody's being held accountable.
You all are giving us a master class in understanding injustices in the Atlanta area, which are applicable in many parts of the country. And I want to kind of slightly pivot a little bit to say you are also developing an excellent reputation for your organizing work. I'm hearing about it. And so I want to know, in the midst of this context of injustice, in the midst of this confusing situation in some regards, as you just spelled out, tell us about the organizing work that you all are doing, because I hear you all have been tremendous. So tell us about that and what's being done.
Well, we believe in diversity of tactics as it relates to organizing people. And I'm not quite sure when you guys wanted to get to the Q&A, if we would be doing that throughout. But what I do see is that one person asked, how would we convince or talk to faith communities who are very much invested in the environmental injustice that's happening, but aren't quite sold on a different way of policing, right? Because they believe that we need police to keep us safe. And that speaks directly to the way we organize and how we organize. Because this movement is intersectional, we've had many people who came into this movement strictly because the city of Atlanta is willing to destroy the largest urban forest in the southeastern United States, simply because the South River is the second most endangered river in the United States, simply because in the state of Georgia, the South River is integral to our water supply because it is the headwater of the Altamaha River, which runs all the way into South Georgia, past Darien and going on into Savannah, right? And then out into the ocean, simply because they know that destroying a massive amount of trees, 381 acres of trees, means very poor air quality in a city that's already overcrowded and vastly polluted. It is only because of the South River Forest that we don't have pollution as bad as we could. However, if they would be able to cut down all of these trees, they're creating a situation where the heat index is going to spike. Residents who live in that area won't even be able to afford paying for cooling bills and energy because it's going to be astronomical. You are at the intersection of environmental justice, economic justice, racial justice. You are at the intersection of everything that affects us in our daily lives. So the way we organize is to that point. There are some people who only care about the environment. But when we show you that the fact that you're willing to cut down trees in this predominantly Black area means that you don't care about these Black people, means that you're willing to underserve and over police these areas. When you connect the dots, then you're able to show people how it all goes together. And there will be some people who will never come over to the side to say, we don't really need police. But the diversity in tactics makes a lane for everybody. And that's why the movement is so successful and really cannot be bound. Because if you believe that there's a different way to imagine policing, then you don't want Cop City, because you understand that militarized training of police officers only escalates tension between police and communities. Then you will understand that alternatives to policing can happen, they should happen. And when you just look at the very fact that policing in and of itself is capitalist and racist, then you might be able to view things in a different way and see the larger picture. Because when we're talking about policing, especially with these police foundations, what we're essentially allowing is for corporations to run the police departments. And again, that inherently is capitalist and racist. So our diversity of tactics is how we have begun to organize, how we continue to organize to help people find exactly where they fit in this movement. And what we see is that the people who continue and stay, they see the bigger picture and they're no longer seeing it just from one side.
If I could, oh, sorry, go ahead, Reverend Lee.
I just want to say a few things to add to what Reverend Keyanna's already said, and then I'll toss it back to you, Reverend Darci. But this is certainly, and we've been in a moment like this for a while, a season like this for a while, but this is a leader-full movement. It's not a leader-less movement, but it is leader-full. And I want to just shout out the fact that we have yes, this faith coalition, the multi-faith coalition to stop Cop City, but that there are people who have, one, been organizing and sounding the alarm on environmental justice for decades, right? We oftentimes come to these moments because Black and brown folks have been trying to scream, from the depths of our souls, like, please pay attention. But we have people who have been organizing, and two movements that I want to call out are environmental justice, which is not the same, right, as just saying climate change or the climate crisis, although those are parts of it. Environmental justice and reproductive justice, right? I want to call out these two movements that are that originated by Black folks in the South, right? And these are frameworks under which we find all of these things, as Reverend Keyanna pointed out, intersecting. Reproductive justice talks about having safe, healthy, and sustainable communities for those of us who have families or don't have families, but to be able to nurture ourselves in those kind of communities, that's environmental justice too, right? I also want to call out that we've got folks who approach this work there's so much room at the table, right? It can be overwhelming, but if people are able to tap into where their skills, where their gifts, and use that for the benefit of the movement, it matters, right? We've got a jail support team that's been working for years to make sure that protesters are able to get out and then have the representation they need, even as 5 protesters still sit in DeKalb County Jail facing domestic terrorism charges, right? The last thing I wanted to say is that the roots of this, for people that may be struggling, because I did see that in the Q&A, for people that may be struggling, it's so important to read history and to reread it and then to read it again, to understand that where we are was not unanticipated. It was almost a foregone conclusion, right? Because we know the history and the roots of policing in these United States is in slavery and slave patrols. We know that policing is built on a white supremacist foundation. And so I think that going back to reread, if your congregation is doing any sort of anti-racism work and they're not talking about policing, this has got to be a key part of it. And finally, people will still struggle, as Reverend Keyanna said, but we are part of a larger movement that the early apostles called the Way, under which the key person of our faith, on which everything hinges, Jesus of Nazareth, was killed by state violence. When I tell people that Jesus was an abolitionist and that if there was no part of his ministry that was clear, it was abolition, that is what I'm talking about. It means to take the gospel seriously and understand that abolition, it is a very long journey. I do not claim to be an abolitionist because I don't know if I'll ever achieve that for myself. But what I am trying to do is work within my church, my school, my community, right? To practice abolitionist ways. And by doing such, I might be able to transform myself by the renewing of my own mind, right? And live into what I believe we're called to, so.
Amen. I hear that. Thank you, Reverend Leo Seyij, preaching to me. And I'm thinking about the question. I feel like we have this big framing, which is really important. And I'm thinking about the journey of my small Alliance of Baptist church to becoming an abolitionist church. And thinking about my co-pastor and deacons going out and protesting in the streets in 2020, and then having that engage us in a movement here in Atlanta that was called DARC, Defund Atlanta, Defunded APD, Refund Communities. And our involvement in DARC connected us with folks who were doing work around getting funds to our communities and had an abolitionist framework for that. Those members of our congregation then did a lot of education around abolition in general, as and we did a couple of studies, Miriam Kaba's book, we did a couple other books, and I think when it comes to churches, and this might be a little hard because I'm Baptist, y'all. So the UCC is real, you got a lot of structures and stuff that I don't know about. But when it comes to the structure that we function under, we function in a non-hierarchical system. And I do see the churches that have been able to be responsive, meaning really put themselves on the line. When we heard that we had a family that lived on Key Road and was concerned and scared about the Cop City going in that area, we were able to respond because there was no institutional protection or institutional guardianship that said, oh, wait, someone might respond in a negative way. It was like, go for that. You know, it was like Jesus going for the one and leaving the 99. That is the positionality of womanism. That is the positionality of accountability to the most vulnerable. That, if I can just be really frank, when in hierarchical institutions, it's almost near impossible to truly embody. And so I would say the challenge to institutions is to say, why aren't we supporting this? What is actually holding us back? If it is, we're trying to gather everyone together, yeah, let's do that. And the one is in trouble. And our guide in this process of community building said, forsake the 99 for the one. And so, yeah, I think when it comes to having a lot to lose, I think that's exactly what a lot of Jesus's ministry was in response to, in fact. And so that might be an unpopular thing, and I think it's unpopular, and it's a not safe position to be, in a church that that doesn't have a hierarchy to support it. It doesn't have a foundation. That doesn't have that backing. And I think that allows us to get into the real work of what keeps us safe, and how can we continue to build structures that do actually care for everyone where they're at.
Thank you so much for that. Can you, for those that are coming from congregations all over this country, give us a sense of ways in which those congregations and faith communities can be in solidarity with what's going on in the struggle with Cop City? Can you give some points for people to kind of plug in and be of support in that regard?
Absolutely. One of the main things that churches can do is educate their parishioners. If you want to have a town hall meeting, if you want to make that virtual, we can definitely help you with that. You can follow stopcopcitysolidarity.org to find other ways to be in solidarity with us. The main thing that we would like conveyed is that our choice to stand against Cop City is rooted in our faith. It is rooted in the tenets of the things that we believe guide us on a daily basis. When we talk about the people who Jesus went to, who he served, and those who were closest to him, he told us to take care of the widows, take care of the orphans. But then when the Sadducees and the Pharisees talked about Jesus eating with people with unclean hands, everyone who Jesus went to was a social outcast. And what we see is that with Cop City, the target is those who are the most marginalized in our society. And those are the people who Jesus came for. Those are the people who he told to make sure that we don't neglect. So we want to make sure that as people of faith, and like Leo said, even some of us who are within our coalition who are anti-faith, although I believe that even if you say you don't believe in God, that is a faith, because faith is simply your belief. And we know, though, that faith without works is dead. So we have to put our faith into action. And even the smallest things, if all you do is put a Stop Cop City sign in your yard, that's standing in solidarity. We want to make sure, though, that all the avenues that we have created remain open so that people can get into this movement where they feel most comfortable. And hopefully they will end up being a part of the movement where they don't feel comfortable, simply because it is an opportunity for them to grow and truly embody the thing that we say we believe in, that Jesus came for the least of these.
Thank you for that. And, one of the things that came across my desk, I'd like to kind of see if this is also an effort that you stand behind, but was, a call for people to organize events in their communities that would strike at one of the critical pillars of support for the Atlanta Police Foundation, in terms of nationwide insurance, a construction company. Is that an effort that you're also getting behind? I mean, people might be concerned about the Waffle House. I heard that. I mean, if we have some Waffle House fans in the audience, I don't know. But is that a strategy that you recommend and get behind?
Absolutely. I mean, the waffles are in on it too. We can't leave them exempt. The waffles, the cop chicken, we can't have any of that because at the end of the day, none of it is good for us. Corporate accountability is definitely a huge piece of the way that we are organizing. And if that looks something like you writing a letter to the CEO of Bank of America, but walking into your local branch with a group of people and deciding that you are going to read that letter in the lobby so that people can hear what's being done with the money that they are putting into Bank of America, then that is something that we love to see because we want to disrupt their business as usual. We want to make it so that nothing is comfortable for these corporations. And we definitely want to make it so that the APA cannot get insurance to insure the project that is Cop City. Any of the corporations, if we get wind of subcontractors, we put it out because we have been able to successfully stop Reeves Young, which was one of the initial subcontractors for the project. We pressured them into pulling out. We need people to understand that it will not be business as usual if your corporation continues to fund the Atlanta Police Foundation and support the oppression of Black people.
I love that answer, and I have to ask as well: have there been any calls for boycotts, and are there any specific companies or products that we should be boycotting? I think that if we want to put some practical legs as far as and extend this thing out to those who are listening and beyond, how about we start by our congregations calling for, let's stop using Coca-Cola products. Let's stop shopping at Home Depot. Until they say no, until they pull away from Cop City, let's stop supporting these things. That does mean we have to confront our own comfort in order to do so. And now I'm wondering, are we willing to do that, especially when we hear that these folk don't look like us and don't necessarily live like us?
No, absolutely. My whole life is a boycott. I don't drink Coca-Cola. I don't buy Coca-Cola. I have 3 relatives who work for Coca-Cola and I don't care. I don't shop at Walmart. I don't shop at Publix. I don't go to Home Depot. I don't fly Delta. I don't bank at Bank of America, Truist, Wells Fargo, or JP Morgan Chase. Like, these are things that I believe are important for me. Chick-fil-A is the biggest thing going in Atlanta because Truett Cathy is from Atlanta, but Chick-fil-A is the most racist and homophobic corporation that there is. They don't like nobody. So why would you keep giving your money to them when they do things like write racial slurs on your package when you place an order? Why would you keep taking yourself there looking stupid? There's no way in the world that you're going to tell me that you don't like me and I'm going to think that my money is going to make you like me. If you don't like me, then you don't like my money neither. So you can't have it. So that means Chick-fil-A. That means Waffle House. I don't want no Waffle House. No way. The mess is greasy and the cooks ain't that good. And they don't keep their workers safe. They are one of the biggest offenders of workplace safety, whether that's sexual harassment or environmental standards. They don't comply with OSHA regulations. We have so many workers in our workers union that are working at Waffle House in unsafe conditions. Waffle House will let you get shot on the job and don't even worry about your family. Why in the hell would you keep eating their waffles? I don't want no waffles that bad because Aunt Jemima and Eggo may be better anyway because what they doing at Waffle House ain't getting the baby no candy at this point. So no Waffle House, no Chick-fil-A. My aunts live for Coca-Cola. I won't buy it. My sister love Publix. I can't stand it. I got friends who say they can't live without Walmart. I will die first.
I love it. I know we're over, but can I just say that this is something that I'm trying to that when I tell you Spirit continues to reveal it to me in my ministry and otherwise. I remember growing up, and I'm showing my age just a little bit, these little bracelets that said W.W.J.D. on them. What would Jesus do? And something that has been revealed to me that I try to focus on whenever I feel like overwhelmed by all of the issues in this, just in my own backyard, right? is WWYA, work where you are. I'm telling you time and time again, when I feel lost, when I need to discern, okay, God, what is it that you want me to do? How should I respond? Work where you are, right? This is not the first cop city on Turtle Island, now known as the United States. This is not the first. And if the kingdom of this world would have it, it won't be the last. So what do? Work where you are, right? I saw someone from Alabama, I think it was Stephanie, put in the chat talking about finding out their community's ties to Cop City, because then they might uncover that there's already a Cop City in the works in their own community, right? But wherever you are, right? Work where you are. Use the skills of your community, of your congregation, and employ them in ways that make sense for your context. We don't need to reinvent the wheel. And the final thing I want to say is, don't stop here. Don't stop at Cop City. Too many people stopped and started when we heard about Ahmaud Arbery or Breonna Taylor or Rayshard Brooks, right? Don't stop and start here, right? This is a life commitment, and it's about assessing where you are, right? How you can get involved and how much capacity you have to continue for the long haul, right? This race isn't going to be given to the swift. It's those of us who are going to endure. And if we are to endure, we cannot stop here, and we cannot give up hope. I dropped an article in the chat where I was admitting to my own lack of faith and just presuming that Cop City was an inevitability. And when I tell you God convicted me on that thing, it is important that we have faith, right? That is what makes us who we are. That prophetic imagination that there is power within us, resurrection power to actually change and shift this world, so that the kingdom of God and the kingdom of heaven is not some dream or some faraway reality, but it is here and now, as the text proclaims. We have to have that faith. So do not give up here. Plug in where it makes sense for your community. Work where you are.
Michael, over the years, we have had some terrific panelists and speakers, some big names. But I tell you, I don't know if there's ever been a time when I have not wanted to end a webinar like today. I feel like I just want this to keep on going, and people who know me know that I am one to always end things on time. But I really don't. This has been tremendously rich. The spirit has been moving, and there's just been some tremendous prophetic voices in this webinar today, and we give thanks for each one of you. And we want to do whatever we can to support what is taking place in your leaderful movement and efforts. One of the things that is a tradition for us is we always have time for people to continue to hang out with us. We realize and respect your time, and so we give you thanks and applause for being with us. We do have with us Thaddeus Elliott from our DC advocacy office, who always gives us an update on what is going on in DC. So I want to also respect his monthly contributions. They're always wonderful. So we do need to wrap up this portion before we transition to that portion. But Michael, any last words you want to say? I'm simply full of gratitude for our panelists today.
Same, Rev. I think it's all been said. Thank you. Sister Keyanna, when you were talking, I just wanted to say, go off, sis, go off. I appreciate it. Thank you all so much for articulating my heart.